Today on the show, your pet can save your life and how Jeff Bezos is getting your tax dollars.
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is a no, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised because it's the year 2018 and everything that you thought you could reliably count on in the world of our political process, the global political process, is subject to investigation. Nothing is what it used to be. Things that seemed impossible just a couple years ago are now commonplace. And for that reason, I have to wonder, could it possibly be that Kim Kardashian West made a meaningful political contribution to our country and the way it's run in the future of us as citizens? The Fraternal Order of Police and the conservative billionaire Koch brothers and the American Civil Liberties Union all agree that possibly she might have. Yeah. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about criminal justice reform. Yeah. Kim Kardashian West met with Donald Trump several times at the White House to discuss prison reform. She also teamed up with Cut 50, an organization co-founded, excuse me, freaking allergies. She teamed up with Cut 50, who are an organization co-founded by CNN's Van Jones that focus on criminal justice reform to advocate for something that just happened. What are we talking about? How on earth did Kim Kardashian West make a meaningful political contribution to the process in this country? Well, here's the deal. And if you're like me, stuff like this is cause for celebration, because anything that's bipartisan, anything that brings people together, anything that gives folks a reason to agree, even though they might be bitter enemies in other circumstances and viciously at each other's throats, anything that gives people on opposite sides of the political fence a reason to agree, to me, is a good thing. First and foremost, because it signifies the fact that, this is the right thing to do. If we all agree on it, this is the right thing to do. So we appear to be moving something, whatever the hell it is, in the right direction. And then also, it gives you a little starting point. If we can agree on this, maybe there's some other stuff we can agree on. They're not an evil a-hole that wants to see America burn. They want some of the stuff that I want too. Maybe we have something in common. These are the things that we look for in life, or at least I look for in life. And if you listen to this show for any length of time, you probably spend a little bit of time looking for as well. What are we talking about? How has Kim Kardashian West affected our political process? Well, this is the deal. At the White House yesterday, the president endorsed criminal justice reform, a criminal justice reform bill, which could be the most significant rewrite of federal prison and sentencing laws in more than a decade. And like I said, everyone from the Koch brothers to Van Jones to the Fraternal Order of Police are in favor of this one. At the White House yesterday, President Donald J. threw his support behind something called the First Step Act. Have you heard about the First Step Act? It's a bill, and you know what? If you're one of the people that listens in Florida, where people with felonies on their record recently got back the right to vote, this is pertinent to your situation. Well, I'm not saying that you're a felon, but it's an interesting way that Florida is sort of leading the charge in initiatives like this. At the White House yesterday, the president threw his support behind this thing called the First Step Act. Now, the First Step Act is a bill that is basically a bill of reform to the federal prison system, as well as a whole bunch of provisions that would reduce some of the harsher mandatory minimum sentencing laws. Back in May, the House, minimum sentencing laws meaning, you get caught with this much weed on you, even though you're close to a state line where another 20 feet away, it would be completely legal. You're going to jail for a really long time. Minimum sentencing laws like that, I suppose. Back in May, the House passed the First Step Act by a wide margin, garnered some bipartisan support. And like I said, the bill addresses prison reforms and improves re-entry programs and job training for federal inmates. It does things like, well, it bans the shackling of pregnant inmates, meaning if you're an inmate, you're pregnant, you don't get chained up. It also increases the amount of something called good time. Good time is something that inmates can earn toward shortening their sentences. And it helps to expand the Bureau of Prisons' compassionate release program for terminally ill inmates. This is the sort of thing that it covers. Now, the version of the bill that the Senate, the Senate version of the bill that was leaked this week would also eliminate mandatory life sentences for drug offenses. Yeah, see? There you go. If you're like me, you're a fan of this kind of thing. Not because you want junkies walking the street, but because, well, there comes a point where a mandatory life sentence for something like marijuana, which is viewed very differently now than it was 5, 10, however many years ago, seems awfully silly. So yeah, it would eliminate mandatory life sentences for drug offenses under federal three-strike laws. It would reduce the stacking of firearm penalties for certain crimes. It would expand this idea of a safety valve, which would basically give judges more discretion in sentencing. And if you're already an inmate, well, this could help you out because it could retroactively apply the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010's penalty reductions to crack cocaine offenders sentenced before the law was passed. Retroactive application of the Fair Sentencing Act could affect thousands of federal drug offenders who received long mandatory minimum sentences under the now reduced sentencing. Is this making sense? Bottom line is, it moves you a little bit closer to what a lot of people regard as common sense justice. But the thing, well, the thing that I think is a real win here is it's a bipartisan bill. The president got behind a bipartisan bill. That will probably make our community safer and give people who deserve it second chances. And anytime we can come together and agree on something in the year 2018, I regard that as a win. I hope you do too.
Real radio. 104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So there you have it. Truth, as they say, in the year 2018, especially, is stranger than fiction. Did Kim Kardashian West make a meaningful political contribution to what it's like to be an American when she met with Donald Trump several times at the White House to discuss prison reform? Don't know. But like I said before, anything that brings together in agreement a selection of people as diverse as Kim Kardashian, Mark Cuban, the Koch brothers, Van Jones, to where they do something that we can all agree upon, I consider this to be a win. In case you're just joining us, we are, of course, talking about the fact that Donald Trump endorsed criminal justice reform that would be, if it happens, could be the most significant rewrite of federal prison and sentencing laws in more than a decade. It essentially boils down to a whole bunch of common sense stuff with regard to mandatory minimum sentences when it comes to drugs. And the interesting thing is, it could work for you retroactively. So if you're in prison for something that on paper doesn't make a whole lot of sense, well, then there's a good chance that this could affect you, and this could affect all of us, really. This could affect the way that the country runs. I'm not a real bleeding heart when it comes to criminals. pretty staunch with regard to the law. But we've all heard that story. That one story of somebody who had something horrible happen to them and wound up in jail for a period of time that they absolutely didn't deserve. And this is what this is meant to address. And the vast majority of people seem to be able to agree on it. And I think that's a good thing. The Fraternal Order of Police are all into it. Fraternal Order of Police, along with a number of law enforcement groups, have come out in support of the legislation. The Fraternal Order of Police said it would allow law enforcement to better focus their resources. So there you go. We're all in favor of people being all in favor of whatever it is. Things that are so clearly the right thing to do that, oh my gosh, people are able to set aside their differences and agree upon it. And we're all in favor of these things because, well, when you find one thing you agree on, you can maybe let go of the notion that anyone who voted differently than you is an evil a-hole that hates America and wants to see it burn. We like this. And you know, so many times when you inspect the so-called differences between people that are on different sides of the political fence, you find out that there's more in common than you would understand. And I don't know if this falls into that category specifically, but did you see what New York's Governor Cuomo said about Texas? I don't know whether he intended to do it or not, but New York Governor Cuomo endorsed Texas's lower taxes and limited regulation in the business world. How so? Well, look, if you're like me, you believe that no matter where it comes from, whether it comes from Donald Trump, whether it comes from somebody else, that making it easier to do business in America, making it easier for American companies, American entrepreneurs to compete is a good thing. Making it easier for a person with some elbow grease and a dream to get themselves into a position to say, take this job and shove it. I've started my own business. I like this. Like those tax cuts, those corporate tax cuts that everyone went, Donald Trump's just doing favors for his rich bazillionaire buddies and there's going to be some sort of kickback. Well, maybe. I certainly am realistic enough to see that playing into things. But the bottom line was when the corporate tax got cut in America, it was putting us on an even keel with the rest of the world. Our corporate taxes were higher than anyone else's. And there was a reason why Burger King was buying Canadian donut chains so they could headquarter themselves in Canada, because it represented massive millions upon millions of dollars saved when it came to paying taxes if you're a Canadian company versus an American company. So it was leveling the playing field and making it easier for American companies to make money. And that's everyone from the tippy-toppy-most of the corporate pile to, like I said, some with a dream and some elbow grease looking to start their own business. And so I'm all in favor of anything that makes it easier for your American to make their way in this world in 2018. And I think that Governor Cuomo of New York unintentionally endorsed Texas's habits of making things easier for the business person, large and small. Low taxes, limited regulation of the business environment in Texas. And he did that in a way. Did you see this? Boggled my mind when it happened. He did this in defense of the more than $1.5 billion in handouts that New York is giving to the folks over at Amazon. Now, Amazon does rather well, wouldn't you agree? Jeff Bezos is the richest person on the planet. So you'd think that Amazon doesn't really need a $1.5 billion handout in tax money. if you're in New York and you see that 1.5 billion of your tax dollars are going to Amazon, who seem to be doing very well, thank you very much, you might be a little chagrined. But, well, here's the thing. Cuomo did it anyway. And Cuomo said he had to do it. Otherwise, Amazon wouldn't headquarter themselves in Queens. They would headquarter themselves in Texas. This is the deal. He was defending, like I said, $1.5 billion in handouts to Amazon for HQ2. He said it was necessary because it's, and I quote, not a level playing field. All things being equal, if we do nothing, they're going to Texas, he said. Yeah. See, New York and Virginia collectively offered more than $2 billion in tax credits, rebates, and other incentives to attract Amazon's HQ2. It's basically accepted that if Amazon decides to set up shop in your town, things are going to go very well. But this $2 billion in tax credits and rebates and all the above, it didn't include what could also amount to hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure spending and worker training and other government assistance. So it's not only but also a situation. What New York offered is pretty freaking insane. Now, in return, what happens? Amazon promised to create about 25,000 jobs at each location. New York stumped up twice as much as Virginia did. If you're in New York and you're not one of those 25,000 people, and you find out that $1.5 billion of your tax money is going to Amazon, how do you feel about that? Not too good. Or at least if you're me, not too good. If it doesn't directly affect you, if it's not something where you can go, this is definitely for the common good, if it's not tangible, real world, real time benefit for us, why the hell are you handing 1.5 million of our hard-earned dollars to Jeff Bezos? I mean, you understand why it's done, but Cuomo himself said he had to do it. He had to do it to put New York in a position to be competitive with places where it's easier to do business. Like I said, New York promised Amazon over $1.5 billion in incentives. I think it was $1.2 billion over the next 10 years as part of something called the Excelsior tax credit. Shout out to Stanley with Excelsior. The state also pledged to help Amazon with all these upgrades to their infrastructure. State is going to be helping with Amazon's job training programs. And they're even going to, get this, they're even going to offer up their assistance when it comes to access to a helipad. Yeah. What exactly does this mean? We'll get into it next.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
So, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, politically I'm not super easy to pin down. A lot of people have figured out that when it comes to conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican or whatever the hell the case may be, I don't necessarily find there to be that much difference between the two parties. I think they're flip sides of the same coin. I think they're like Coke and Pepsi. They're both sugary water that you should consume carefully, because too much is definitely not a good thing. And, well, I have a fundamental distrust of politicians. And I suppose, it's interesting. I think I believe, politically speaking, in anything that looks toward our futures. And what's interesting, if you say, I care about the future of this country, I've noticed this. Liberals will say, well, you're moving forward. You're a progressive. You're a liberal. If you're concerned about the future, You are concerned about the future. You're not someone who's a conservative that wants to hold on to the past pointlessly. If you say you care about the future of America, if you care about the future of Americans, people on the left immediately identify with you. But you know what else happens? People on the right immediately identify with you. You care about the future of Americans. You care about the hardworking American man. You care about making it easier for people to make their own way. You're a Republican, my friend. It's interesting, right? Try it. It's a nifty party trick. Maybe, Thanksgiving's coming up. You can sit around that divided dinner table and tell people you care about the future of Americans and the future of America. And what's interesting is both sides will try and claim you as their own. So I suppose that's really what matters to me. The future of Americans. Your future. Mine too. And I could not have come across a more clear illustration of the future of America when it comes to how things are going to be run from a business perspective than this thing that we've been talking about. Governor Cuomo sort of unintentionally endorsing Texas and their low tax limited regulation business environment. And he was doing it in defense of handing out billions to Amazon. In case you haven't been following it, where Amazon is going to be headquartered, their second headquarters, has been, the subject of great debate. A lot of people kind of consider it to be like the golden ticket, getting Amazon to set up shop in your town. So, cities were vying for it like you wouldn't believe. Now, we know that it's going to be in Queens, in New York. And a big part of that is the more than $1.5 billion in handouts to Amazon for HQ2. Now, this comes off of the back of hardworking Americans. This is hardworking American tax dollars being handed over to Jeff Bezos and his company. Tax dollars going to a private company, the biggest company, the company run by the single richest man in the world. If you're a taxpayer and you see that happening, you start to go, what the hell, man? What the hell? Why? And Governor Cuomo of New York defended it, saying, well, we had to compete with Texas somehow. So they did it. They did it by promising Amazon $1.525 billion in tax incentives. $1.2 billion over the next 10 years as part of their tax credit. New York State pledged to help Amazon with infrastructure upgrades. Hey, private company that's already doing really well, we're going to spend tax dollars helping you upgrade your infrastructure. We're going to help you with your job training programs. We're even going to assist in, this was the kicker. This was the part that really made me go, wow. If this doesn't start making the taxpayer look a little bit differently at work environments in America, I don't know will. Don't know what will. New York has promised to help Amazon secure access to a helipad. Yes. Basically a place for Jeff Bezos to chopper in and out of. None of this, absolutely none of this, comes with a price tag. This is a handout. This is a handout from the taxpayer of New York to Jeff Bezos, the richest man on the planet, basically. And unless you're one of the 20, and bear in mind how many people are in New York State, it's a lot. It's a lot more than 25,000. Unless you're one of the 25,000 that benefits by getting a job at Amazon, because that's how many jobs they have said they will bring to wherever the hell they are. 25,000 jobs. Unless you're one of those 25,000 people, what's the upside for you? What the upside is a little bit of an education, I suppose, about business and business environments. The taxpayers in New York, except for the ones that, except for those 25,000, they're going to get a job. at Amazon, when Amazon eventually has jobs to offer, are footing the bill for this. Now, if you're like me, that can't feel good. You're like, hold on a second. My governor just took money out of my pocket instead of using it on schools or roads or fixing that freaking pothole at the end of my street. It's going to go to help Jeff Bezos get even richer. Okay, I don't get it. And if that doesn't start making you look toward places where it's easier to do business, where they wouldn't have had to stump up all those tax credits to compete, I don't know what will. I just want to repeat this in case I'm maybe not being clear enough about this. Texas has this lower tax, deregulated environment in which to do business. It benefits everything from the little guy or girl with some elbow grease, some gumption, and a dream trying to set up a business in an entrepreneurial type of way. Benefits everyone from them to the biggest companies in the world like Amazon. And in order to compete with that, Cuomo had to take $1.5 billion essentially out of the pockets of New Yorkers and hand it to Jeff Bezos. Is the free market starting to make a little bit more sense? I mean, I'm not saying it didn't make sense to you before. And look, I'm not saying that companies should be allowed to run riot, operate in a manner that is devoid of ethics. But I'm just trying to illustrate the benefit, the freedom that comes with economic freedom and deregulation. Now, look, this is a can open. Worms everywhere, obviously. And there's going to be people that hit me up and go, AD, this is, you're missing this, and the other thing. And, you know, you can't possibly say that Texas has it right. I don't know. Lived in Texas for many years. The average Texan, and I don't have figures to back this up, but the average Texan that I knew just seemed to have a bit of an easier time existing and making their way in the world than the average New Yorker. Two cities, New York and Houston, that I love very, very, very much. I love the people in these cities. And I got to tell you, one of the things that was appealing about Texas, after having been someone who would grind it out every single day in New York City, was the fact that people seem to be okay in Texas. People seem to have a sense that they could figure it out. They could make it work. They could make it happen. People seem to have a little bit more of a dream, a little bit more of a willingness to go out on a limb, willingness to try some stuff, take some risks, do some things, because the environment was set up in such a manner that if you weren't a massive Wall Street company, you could win. That was what I felt when I moved to Texas. I mean, the whole thing where I didn't have to pay state tax, that was really freaking cool too. That was not lost on me. But Governor Cuomo basically said it. He endorsed a state doing things completely differently than New York does. He basically admitted that New York businesses are at a competitive disadvantage against states like Texas, saying it's not a level playing field to begin with. All things being equal, if we do nothing, they're going to Texas. So, cost them $1.5 billion of American taxpayers' money, of New York taxpayers' money, to stop Amazon from going to Texas. And he talked about there not being a level playing field. Well, maybe it's time that New York and places like it start thinking about how they can level things off.
AD on the radio.
So, there's one story that I want to share with you today in the news. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stories I want to share with you today in the news, but this one I thought was especially interesting. If you are like me, whatever pet you have, you love your pet. Animals, especially dogs, are just, they're a really big deal to me. If you don't have a dog, if you're not a dog person, I don't know if this seems foreign or alien to you, but I got to tell you, if you are like me, you believe that dogs might be the closest thing that we're ever going to get to proof that there's a God. Only because, well, here's this thing that was put on earth. All it wants to do is love you and protect you and be your friend. That's all a dog wants to do with its life. Show you love, protect you, be your best friend. If that's not a sign, asks nothing in return, by the way. I mean, would like for you to feed them. But if you don't do not leave your dog up to their own devices, by the way. I'm not saying that. But if you, for whatever reason, weren't able to feed your dog, they would still want to be friends with you. They would love you, care for you, protect you. When you're up, you're down, no matter what. That's what they're there for. They were put here on this earth for these purposes. And if that's not a sign that somebody somewhere is looking out for us, I don't know what is. But it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. There's a very good chance, according to a new report, that your pet, your dog, your cat, whoever it is, could wind up saving your life. How so? It's an interesting news story. We'll get into it a little later on in the show when we tackle Mind Witness News. Right now, though, bearing in mind that Thanksgiving is right around the corner and there's all sorts of ways to ruin it, let's hear comedian John Pinette talk about how his family ruined Thanksgiving for him.
My family ruined Thanksgiving for me. My first Thanksgiving in the house, I was going to host it. I never hosted Thanksgiving. I was going to have it catered. I wanted to be done really nice. They said, no, you always take us to restaurants. We're going to cater it for you. We're bringing food. There's 10 of us. My sister brings a 12-pound turkey. Grace did not go the way I would have liked it to. Thank you, God, for the 12-pound turkey. I didn't know they made them that small. It must have got hit by a car. I hope it didn't suffer. Since there are 10 of us, tell me there are 9 more turkeys just like this in the kitchen. Tell me this is like the Cornish game hen of turkeys. And my other sister, the health nut, she brought the vegetables. She brought turnips. People bring stuff to your house. You want to be nice, gracious. How do you like my turnips? I don't think you're supposed to eat these. These suck with butter on them. And nothing sucks with butter on it. Turnips are a horrible vegetable and they show up during the holidays. What is with the turnip? First of all, you can't cook it. You can't cut it with any knife in the kitchen. You have to bounce it off the concrete for an hour to soften it up. Then you have to boil it for 8 hours. If it's that difficult, the turnip doesn't want to be eaten. Turnips are a root vegetable. They grow in the ground. That means at the beginning of the world, God made the turnip and said, no. This didn't come out right. Gabriel, try this. Oh, you don't like it either, huh? I was going to put it on a tree, but you know what? I'll bury it and they won't find it. Yeah, well, some idiot dug it up and brought it to my house for Thanksgiving.
Like I said, a little later on in the show, in today's news, you and I will discuss proof that that pet of yours may very well save your life. Right now, though, what else is going on in the world? So much. Netflix has canceled the Tony Danza series, The Good Cop. The fact that you didn't know there was a Tony Danza series called The Good Cop is probably why. There's a... Oh, do you see this? There's a shattered window in an abandoned bar in Scotland that... Well, pictures of it are going viral because it looks like Yoda. Yeah, this shattered window at an abandoned bar in Scotland is going viral because it looks like Yoda. Makes for a cool conversation piece, but fix it they should. Before hurt, someone gets. And sued they are. A new study says kids tend to have the same number of romantic partners as their mother had. Well, not kids, but children of mothers have the same number of romantic partners their mom had. So basically, however many people your mom got busy with, your number's likely to be similar. Note to Madonna's kids, you're in for a hell of a ride. A group of Wisconsin high school students posed for a group photo while giving a Nazi salute to Sieg Heil. That is not the right thing to do. Oh, so stupid. Speaking of school photos, did you see this? A big part of the thrill of getting your school picture taken, your class picture taken, was the intangible, the unknown. You had absolutely no idea how you looked until you got the pictures back. You stood in line, pre-digital photography, and you dressed up, you tried to look your nicest, you thought you'd combed your hair, but there was a giant cowlick there. You had an enormous alfalfa thing going on, and the photographer didn't care. The photographer was just there to take your photo. Hey kid, what's that under your arm? What? Click. Aww. It was a real roll of the dice, and you knew this photo, horrific as it might have been, as much as they might have managed to capture all your prepubescent acne, that was going in the yearbook, and there was nothing you could do about it. It was there in perpetuity forever. That was then. That was in a far-off time known as the late 90s. Now things are totally different. In this social media obsessed, Facetune selfie environment in which kids are being brought up, things are very different. And now, if parents are unhappy with their kids' school photos, they can pay extra to have them retouched. True story.
The company that shoots a lot of these school photos is giving parents the option of having their children's portraits retouched. For real. For $8, you can get what they call basic retouching, which removes blemishes, pimples, and whatnot. $12, you get premium retouching. They whiten the teeth. They will even your skin tone and remove scars. For $10,000, you get supersized retouching, which gets you a brand new, better-looking kid. It goes home.
I just think it's a bad idea. I think that lousy yearbook photo, the pain that you have to endure because of it as a child, is part of what toughens you up for life in the real world, but we live in a different time. Give me an O, give me an L. You and I were getting old. And a big part of the reason why we're getting old, as it turns out, is because our pets are saving our lives. Look, you and I have talked about this numerous times before. We just talked about this. Dogs are the greatest. Pets are the greatest. It is impossible to share a living space with something warm with a heartbeat and not love it. But dogs, cats, they teach us how to love. A dog is love, in my mind. But not only do they teach us about love, do they teach us about companionship, do they teach us about responsibility to another living thing, they also, like I said, save our lives. Every time you get mad at your dog for eating food off your plate when you weren't looking, or for barking at a gust of wind at 3 a.m, or the sprinklers, in Millhouse's case, at 2 a.m, always the sprinklers, always at 2 a.m. Remember this. There is a surprisingly good chance that dog of yours will save your life one day. According to a new survey, 1 out of 3 pet owners say that their pet has alerted them to danger, whether it's a fire, a carbon monoxide leak, an intruder, a break-in, or something else. And about 1 out of 10 people say their pet has literally saved their life or the life of someone they know. So, a little extra snuggle time with your furry, 4-legged family member when you get home tonight. They deserve it. Thank you so much for hanging out.